Hi, my name is Peter Nelson. I am president of Nelson Insurance Advisors. We specialize in using non-woke Catholic fraternal insurance companies in order to protect our clients and members, whether it be in regards to life insurance or retirement planning. We have over 23 years of experience in the insurance industry, and we want to do business with people that believe the way that we believe. So please reach out to us at 423-793-2613, or you can find us on our website at nelsonplan.com. God bless and Godspeed.
Over the weekend, Pope Leo XIV signed his first apostolic exhortation, which is due to be released on the 9th of October. That will be Thursday. I expect on Friday I'll be talking about that with you, going over the subject of it, which appears to be a continuation of Pope Francis's last encyclical and was in the works when Pope Francis fell ill and passed away. So imagine my surprise when yesterday, hot on the heels of that, while everyone is waiting for his first formal teaching document of any kind, you get a reform document. And a lot of people are doing cartwheels over this. And I'm not really sure why. This has to do with the Vatican Bank. And the Vatican Bank has been the source of virtually 90% of the scandals in the church involving the Vatican since its inception in the 1940s, in the aftermath of World War II. By the 1960s, it was regularly making the news for all the wrong reasons. And Ted McCarrick was tied to the Vatican Bank, as were a whole host of other villains in the post-conciliar period. And every pope has tried to reform the Vatican Bank, and every single one of them has failed, almost as if the Catholic Church should just contract out with a bank in Switzerland or in Italy or something to handle their finances instead of having its own financial institution. Almost as if usury should not be something the church ever gets involved with. Amazing idea in itself. But every pope has tried to fix this problem, including Francis. And so we're going to just kind of go over this story because there is an implication here. If Leo is willing to repeal this, what else of Francis is he willing to repeal? So the Catholic News Agency posted this to X. Pope Leo XIV has permitted the Holy See's main financial body to use financial institutions outside the Vatican for its investment activities, reversing Pope Francis's 2022 instruction to move all funds to the so-called Vatican Bank. Now, this is probably in reference here to the Cardinal Becciu mess, if you're not familiar with him. The story goes a little something like this. Under Benedict XVI, Archbishop Vigano was given the task by the Pope to investigate the Vatican financial system. And he found money hidden away in the millions upon millions of euros, hidden in places it should not be. And then for his own safety, to give you an idea how bad this is, for his own safety, Benedict made him papal nuncio to the United States, moved him as far away from Rome as he could. For his own safety, Vigano has said this publicly. He was followed in this position by Cardinal George Pell, who, under Benedict and then Francis, was investigating the Vatican financial system and finding millions upon millions of euros in places it should not be. Off the books money, all sorts of weird things. And then one day he decided to go to his home country of Australia for some church business. And when he left, not long after he left Rome, a mysterious wire transfer went to Australia. And then after he landed in Australia, he was charged with, well, unspeakable evil things that all turned out to be false and also turned out to be impossible if you actually know the details of the story and what was alleged. It was literally impossible for it to have happened. And I have gone over this in the past in other stories. But then it goes on like that, right? After Cardinal Pell, it was Cardinal Becciu, who was an Italian who had papal dreamed of being Pope, who was sent to investigate this, except this time he became the fall guy. And that's just the last 10 years of this, 10, 15 years of this. This is a consistent problem going back to the 1960s. If you want to read an interesting, easy-to-read book on the Vatican Bank and its corruption, Malachi Martin's book, Vatican, which details the scandals in the Catholic Church from World War II to the late 1980s, written in a fictional narrative, but 100% real. Everything actually that you see there happened, with the exception of a few narrative things to make it work as a fictional story. But everything happened there. That's an interesting way to learn about things that go just up to the 1980s. It serves as the prelude to his more famous book, Windswept House. So Francis imposed a reform on things that tried to keep most of the financial things in-house, and Leo rescinded that. Some are reading this as a good thing. Others are saying that this is essentially buttering up the secular world and things. So CNA's headline, Pope Leo XIV allows outside banks to manage Holy See investments. Here are the details. The Pope has permitted the Holy See's main financial body to use financial institutions outside the Vatican for its investment activities, reversing Pope Francis's 2022 instruction to move all funds to the so-called Vatican Bank. In the legal order published Monday, Leo said the Vatican's asset management body, the administration of the patrimony of the Apostolic See, should generally use the Institute for the Works of Religion, better known as the Vatican Bank, for its investment activities, unless the competent bodies deem it more efficient or convenient to use financial intermediaries established in other countries. The Pope said he consulted experts and evaluated recommendations from the Council for the Economy for the Rescript, called Consultation Cura, shared responsibility. This is what I want to focus on here. He consulted experts and evaluated recommendations from those in the know before acting to repeal something of Francis. And this is what you're going to see people say as evidence that he could be open to other repeals, like, say, Traditionis Custodes. I remain skeptical. A lot of Catholics believe that the liturgy question is the big question facing the church. It's not. The big issue facing the church right now is synodality and corruption at the Vatican Bank. That's why he has spent no time on the liturgy, by his own admission. Now, that doesn't mean he might not repeal it. I am skeptical that that could happen. But he has recently with Cardinal Robert Serra, who's very publicly outspoken about the traditional Mass. He has allowed Cardinal Burke to offer the traditional Mass at St. Peter's here in the coming days. So we don't know what's going to happen. I tend to be skeptical of him rescinding that order. I, however, would like to be wrong about that. Now here, let's continue with the Vatican Bank story, because this is a much more pressing issue for the church at large than the Latin Mass. And that will shock a lot of people. You got to remember, less than 1% of Catholics in the West go to the Latin Mass. This is not even on their radar for most Catholics. So Pope Francis in August 2022 had ordered the Holy See and connected entities to move all financial assets out of other banks and solely into the institutes of religion, in the wake of controversy over investments by the Secretariat of State. The Secretary of State should be separate from the Vatican Bank, but kind of wasn't. These are the scandals that are for things like the Vatican funding with your tithing dollars the Elton John documentary, Rocket Man. Now, there are a lot of Elton John types in the hierarchy, so that doesn't surprise me that they would want to fund that. Other things that they funded that they shouldn't have were condo building projects in London. Okay, that's the kind of stuff that caused a lot of scandal back in 2021 and 2022. The papal rescript was Francis's interpretation of Article 219, paragraph 3 of Predicate Evangelium, the Constitution of the Roman Curia promulgated in March 2022, which says, quote, the execution of the APSA's management of real estate and movable assets, so again, those condos and other movable assets, is carried out through the Institute of Works for Religion. In Leo's rescript, which repeals his predecessors, the investment activities must also conform to policies from the Vatican Investment Oversight Committee, established in 2022 and chaired by Cardinal Kevin Farrell, former roommate of Ted McCarrick. Now, at some point, someone other than Cardinal McCarrick's former roommate is going to be in charge of this. But for now, this places the power, or at least oversight of it, back into the hands of someone who was utterly shocked by Ted McCarrick's evil activities. It was his roommate, would have been in the building probably when some of this stuff was going down, in feigned ignorance. Co-responsibility in communio is one of the principles of service of the Roman Curia, as desired by Pope Francis and established in the Apostolic Constitution Predicate Evangelium of March 19, 2022. The Pope wrote, "This shared responsibility," you could also use the word synodality, which also concerns the curial institutions responsible for the Holy See's financial investment activities, requires that existing provisions be consolidated and the roles and responsibilities of each institution be clearly defined, enabling everyone to converge in a dynamic of mutual collaboration, he said. Note that he is quoting Pope Francis as if to say that his repeal of Francis's 2022 document actually helps accomplish the goal Pope Francis set forward to do to begin with. When Leo stood on the loggia, May 8th, 2025, he said that he was continuing the work of Francis. Keep that in mind. Now, why would he repeal his document to continue his work? Could be that he thought that Francis's goals for reform were good, and this one document was just a misstep, and that he's fixing the misstep. That's just my reading of it. A few notable Catholics online have said that we have the first motu proprio of the Leonine Pontificate, which repeals the rescript. Not that big a deal, I think, but he does follow it up with this, and this is kind of the point that I keep coming back to. One Francis-era rescript now reversed, more in the pipeline, almost certainly. I don't know why he thinks that's almost certainly going to be the case, because there's a lot of people who still think Leo is going to repeal Fiducia Supplicans, Amoris Laetitia, maybe Laudato Si while he's at it, and Traditionis Custodes. That's a pipe dream. I don't think any of those are getting repealed. At best, an amendment to Traditionis Custodes may come that loosens up the TLM a little bit in exchange for silence on the part of traditional Catholics in America. You should watch, if that does happen, who takes the bait, who decides that they're going to basically sell out the faith for consigning Catholics to a sort of a little far off corner where we will keep quiet and not comment on evil things being done to the church. But Mr. Hazel continues saying, perhaps the rescript issued on the 20th of February 2023 could also be abolished soon. Or even better, the abolition of the motu proprio of 16th July 2021 and return to the one of July 7th, 2007. What you don't know he's referring to here is 20 February 2023 was Fiducia Supplicans, and 16th July 2021 was Traditionis Custodes, 7th of July 2007 was Summorum Pontificum. There are people out there basically wish casting this to happen. They're putting the idea out there, putting positive energy and positive vibes out there, basically, hoping that this turns into the repeal of those documents because to better achieve the desired reform of the Vatican Bank in the eyes of the current Pope, he is repealing what he might have considered a misstep on the part of his predecessor. Secular media has jumped on this story, by the way. That's how big of a deal the Vatican Bank is. Reuters headline, Pope Leo trims powers of Vatican Bank, rolling back a Francis reform. The Vatican's financial reputation has been tarnished in past decades, writes Reuters, by its opaque finances in cases of corruption, embezzlement, and other crimes. Francis, who led the church for 12 years, enacted a series of reforms to address the issue. Leo's decree only rolls back one of those reforms, which mandated that all investments be handled by the Vatican Bank. Some officials have complained since the 2022 reform that Francis's move had given the bank too much power over other Vatican departments, which could not even have investments in banks in nearby Italy. That was also one of the complaints, by the way, of Cardinal George Pell. He thought that that Francis's reform was a terrible idea. So it could be that Pope Leo is listening to the late Cardinal Pell's observation, and maybe it's others in the Pope's orbit have pointed out what Cardinal Pell had said and agreed with it. Could very well be that putting all that money into the corrupt Vatican Bank, having them given total control, is a bad idea. Now we can go here to another Catholic source on this. We go to Catholic Herald to show you this because as you can see, there's there's a ton of reporting on this. And I'll have links to the documents and everything else at returntotradition.org and the Anthony Stine Substack after this is all done. So you can read these for yourself. Don't take my word for it on any of this. But here is Catholic Herald. The release of Leo's first motu proprio changes tack on Francis's reforms for Vatican finances. There's a lot of spinning going on with this. You saw Mr. Hazel putting out there the hope that the other landmark movements of Francis's will be undone. We'll see about that. I'm skeptical. I'd love to see the Synod on Synodality just abandoned, but that's not going to happen. And you're seeing this is the kind of spin here, that this is the change of tack on Francis's reform. Not necessarily. Again, it could have just been seen as a misstep. Leo's latest decree explicitly continues this reforming vision of Francis's by clarifying how the Vatican's financial institutions cooperate and share responsibility, aka synodality, in the managing of the Holy See's investments. At the same time, the motu proprio repeals the 2022 instruction that regulated the management of financial assets and liquidity with the Holy See. You might be wondering, why all this focus on money? Because the Vatican controls billions of dollars. That's why every diocese in the world tithes to the Vatican, every single diocese. You give money in the collection plate, in theory. Most of you I know have stopped doing that for various reasons, but most of you will say you give money to the collection plate at your parish. Your parish pays a small portion of that money to the diocese. Every parish in the diocese does. The diocese then sends a small portion of what they collect through the tithing, as well as other methods, including from government contracts and other things. And a small percentage of that goes to the Vatican, right? That's how it works. And so we're talking lots and lots of money here. And that's not counting the tourist dollars for the Vatican. How many people visit the Holy See every single year? Staggering amounts. Now, the ultimate wish fulfillment, I think, of this comes from Rate Caeli under the headline, "A True Evidence of Unity." Leo XIV receives Cardinal Cipriani Thorn and the first abrogation of a Francis document. This was a Benedict ally. This is a bishop who was allied with Benedict that Francis sidelined. I would like to see, as a true sign of unity, Archbishop Emeritus Hector Agur, Francis's old arch nemesis in Argentina, who was basically sidelined as soon as Francis could. He get an audience with the Pope and have a conversation with him. That would be a sign of unity. I don't think it's going to happen, though. But we'll go over here. Here's what they have to say, because again, people are getting very hopeful about this with the repeal of one document. Another important milestone today was the publication of Leo XIV's first motu proprio connunciatura on some financial aspects of the Holy See document here in Italian. It is a short document on technical matters of the financial administration of the Vatican. What was most important about it was the simple and plain abrogation of the whole Francis document on the same matter, the rescript of August 23rd, 2022. That is it. A past relevant document by Francis may simply be abrogated by a new motu proprio, a good precedent. I hope they're right. I really do hope that this is just the first of many, but I tend to be skeptical. Go to Solare Non Possum. This is a European Catholic news outlet that was very critical of Francis and big cheerleaders for Pope Leo XIV. Leo XIV reforms Vatican finances. Ideological decisions of the past abolished. Now that's interesting. This is the first you're hearing that what Francis did was ideological on this reform. I'll remind you, the Vatican Bank has been a thorn in the side of every single pope since the 1960s at least. And every few years, there would be the same kind of scandals over and over again. Because maybe the church shouldn't be in the business of this kind of thing. Again, find some organization that they can contract with that runs things ethically and is willing to handle the money the Vatican gives it in a responsible manner that is not in violation of the faith. Maybe they could do that instead of having its own banking institution. A signal of revision. While remaining within the framework established by Francis's document, Leo XIV's document introduces a change of direction from the heavily centralized model of 2022. It was a request also raised by the College of Cardinals, and we presented it to the Pope, pointing out the distortions of certain ideologically driven decisions made in recent years, a curial prelate noted. The Pope aims to foster shared responsibility, avoiding both dispersion and concentration of economic power, restoring clarity of roles and greater internal transparency. The apostolic letter published yesterday in L'Osservatore Romano and destined for the Acta Apostolica Sedis, which is the official acts of the Holy See, of the Roman Pontiff, basically. If it's not there, it doesn't count, basically. Takes effect immediately. It is the first motu proprio for Pope Leo's pontificate and addresses a crucial issue, the Vatican's finances. The Pope acknowledged that certain matters indeed needed to be corrected, a prelate familiar with the economic dossier recently confided, suggesting that the pontiff intends to restore order and coherence to the complex administration of the Holy See. Through this legislative act, Leo XIV marks the beginning of a new season of governance, which is the church's economy is called to rediscover its true vocation, to be an instrument of communion, not of power. And I think they're reading a lot into that. I really do. To be an instrument of communion and not in power. It's an interesting thought. It's an interesting subject to talk about right now because we have news of a little less ambiguous kind involving the Pope. The Pope has been speaking a lot about immigration. A lot. We're, after all, in the jubilee of the immigration or something right now, happening right now. And he has spoken a lot and is taking less subtle digs at the current American president with every passing day, it seems. And I'm not the only one noticing this. I've just been waiting for other figures, other media types to point this out. And of course, secular right-wing media has noticed this and is not thrilled. Go to, of course, the Gateway Pundit. The headline, Pope Leo offers another jibe at Trump over deportations, urges Catholics to embrace open borders under new missionary age. Now, why would he be speaking on this? There's a hypothesis out there, and I think it's a cynical one, but I don't put it past anybody in Rome to be this cynical. And what's cynical is this. There is a move by, this could be a move to get Catholics to abandon enforcing Trump's immigration policies. You might ask, well, what do you mean enforcing? Turns out a lot of Border Patrol agents are Catholics. A lot of them are. So now you're going to be having this issue framed as in a purely moral way. And then you got to ask yourself, what's that going to lead to? If this issue is framed entirely morally, you can then enter into this area being that they're doing a job that is sinful in nature, and then put pressure on them to leave their employment, to stop being agents for the border. Even better, you might even be able to start enabling bishops to levy excommunications on them for enforcing Caesar's just laws according to everything the church has ever written on the subject going back millennia. This is what's expected. And this is why with his apostolic exhortation coming, I fully expect you're going to see things in there about this issue. Pope Leo XIV continues to make thinly veiled jibes against the Trump administration's stance against illegal immigration. Speaking in front of thousands of pilgrims at St. Peter's Square on Sunday, Leo warned that migrants must not be treated with, quote, the coldness of indifference or the stigma of discrimination. Without singling any country in particular, Leo said that Catholics should, quote, open our arms and hearts to them, welcoming them as brothers and sisters, being for them a presence of consolation and hope. He explained that the church was living through a new missionary age that tasked its members with providing hospitality and welcome, compassion, and solidarity to migrants coming to the West. In the communities of ancient Christian tradition, such as those of the West, the presence of many brothers and sisters from the world's South should be welcomed as an opportunity through an exchange that renews the face of the church, he said, according to Reuters. And we'll pause here. He makes a reference to the world's South. There's a phrase that comes from Marxist critiques of economic arrangements, of international trade and the rest, and that is the term global South. It comes from modern late Cold War to today, especially post-Cold War Marxist political thinkers. I had to read a bunch of that stuff in grad school. And he's invoking essentially kind of a Marxist phraseology here. The Catholic Church actually teaches about migration. I've already mentioned multiple times in multiple live streams that the church says that migrants have a duty to follow the laws of Caesar and to assimilate, essentially, as well as, of course, Catholics and the state having a responsibility to treat people like human beings. Fine. Not many people disagree with that at the most basic level. But what it also says is that the church has said that governments have the right to restrict who can come in because they have to actually care first and foremost for their people. Common sense stuff. And that part's getting left out because we're talking about the single greatest destabilization force in the post-war period is the current crisis we're going through. Because it is a crisis. And the Vatican is only recognizing it as a crisis for those who are committing these crimes. The article goes on. He says the Pope, did not differentiate between legal and illegal migration, nor make any reference to the countless number of migrants who have already migrated to the West, many of whom do not share the Christian faith. Leo's remarks come days after he appeared to criticize the Trump administration's pro-life position in the context of the policy of mass removal. Someone who says I'm against the sacrifice to Moloch, but says I'm in favor of capital punishment is not really pro-life, he explained. So someone says I'm against the sacrifice, but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the U.S. I don't know if that's pro-life. And on it goes. And of course, the White House press secretary, who is, I thought, a Catholic, I'm not sure, though, rejected what he had to say, because of course she did, because it's nonsense. And then it goes on to point out the, him blessing a block of ice, which then turned into a meme. If you haven't seen those memes, you should check them out. They're actually quite humorous. Traditionalist Catholic says the purpose of government is justice and the common good. Yes. And governments should be first and foremost concerned with their people, the people who put them in the power to be government in the first place. I'm not saying, that government is derived from the consent of the governed or anything like that. That's not a Catholic idea per se. But there is some truth to it, at least, right? Governments lose their legitimacy when they start working against the interests of their own people. That's not a controversial statement. At least it wasn't until recently. I'm curious, though, what you think about this. Will Rome be the center of evil? I don't think so. I mean, some church fathers have suggested that Rome will become the seat of the Antichrist, but does that mean the city of Rome? Or does that mean the Holy See? And if it's the Holy See, does that mean that it's a pope? Probably not. It seems like the church has said a pope will not be the Antichrist. It could be some figure who basically kicks the pope out of Rome and uses the Vatican as his throne. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, why wouldn't you? if you were the man of sin. Now I'm curious though, what people think about all this. So let me know in the comments. Do you think that the Pope's words about migration are continuously being targeted to the U.S.? Do you generally think that what he is saying here, or where he's likely to go in future documents, is to essentially try to get Catholics to stop working for the government and enforcement of these laws that they absolutely hate? Katya says, I can't imagine being his brother. In recent statements he had made, in the aftermath of what happened to Charlie Kirk, the Pope spoke about Charlie Kirk briefly. And he talked about how we all need to get along. And people loved that. And nobody noticed something he said there. Something I found reprehensible, actually. He said, even in my family, we have somebody who has an extreme position, and yet we all get along. Dismissing his brother's, MAGA views as being the extreme position. It's not an extreme position. This is like the Make America Great Again side of things actually has kind of old-fashioned Republican plus patriotic views that were not uncommon. It's just the spokesman for that position tends to be kind of have a personality that some people find off-putting, to put it mildly. Broski Bear says being pro-illegal immigration in the U.S. is essentially being pro-servitude, pro a bunch of stuff I can't say on YouTube. A country without borders isn't a country. This is anti-U.S. policy. It's actually anti-decency in general. I've been following the same problem in Europe for more than a decade. And if you want to know why you have in the UK a third party about to become the main party in the country in their coming elections, it's because of these things. Same with why in Germany they've been fighting off a basically, by American standards, center-right milquetoast conservative party that they have dubbed far right. Because, including the bishops, by the way, I covered that extensively here. Their German bishops were wading knee-deep into politics and telling people which parties to not vote for. It's because of this issue. And it's why it's so peculiar that Rome refuses to see what's happening. This destabilization from this issue that they've taken the side of the elites on. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in today. Please pray for the church. Pray for the Pope. I'm not trying to make you angry at him. Pray for him. the salvation of souls is the most important thing it's the first law of the church, and it should be our first concern, including the salvation of the man accepted by the world as the Roman pontiff. We should pray for him, pray for all of them, all these bishops and all these priests that we have to speak negatively about from time to time, and pray for me as well. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.